No part of this recording may be used to train your water-guzzling plagiarism machines. Welcome to another episode of Fandom X Archive with your host, Diana Fowley, and our guest for this month, Dr. Bethan Jones. Bethan and I sat down earlier this month to talk about the X-Files, the fandom, Slash, fanfiction, queer identities in the fandom, the patriarchy, and Diana Fowley. The resulting episode is an almost 2-hour long discussion that could have been 2 more, but then would have to break it into 2 episodes. Before we begin with the episode proper, a little correction. Amber Benson played Tara on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and not Dawn, as I have said in the interview. With that out of the way, let's begin. Welcome to another episode of Fandom X Archive with your host, Diana Fowley, aka Alien Super Soldier, aka That Cry Chick. Today, we have a very special guest, someone that I've wanted to talk to and interview for such a long time, and I finally got the chance, Dr. Bethan Jones. Dr. Bethan Jones has a PhD from Cardiff University for her dissertation titled Fandom is Beautiful, Except When It Isn't: Hate, Dislike, and Toxicity Online. Her first book, The Truth Is Still Out There, 30 Years of the X-Files, was published by Fayetteville Mafia Press in 2023. She has written and co-edited countless articles, essays, and publications on the topics ranging from online fandom to crowdfunding and culture wars. She is currently a research associate of the Synthetic Pasts Project, as well as a lecturer at Cardiff University and an honorary research fellow at Museum Wales. She is also an X-Files fan whose love for the show stretches its roots all the way to the 90s. And I apologize for stumbling, but I was reading from a document. But with all that out of the way, please welcome Dr. Bethan Jones. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm honestly so excited to talk about the X-Files, as you know. Um, I'm really good. I finished my marking for last semester, which is always a relief. And yeah, doing well, thank you.
So I probably start with a little story how we met. I didn't know you before we met at the File Fest in
Mhm.
2023. And I was walking the grounds, and there was a lot of vendors, artists selling X-Files related art and merch. And there was you selling your book, The Truth Is Still
Yep.
Out There, 30 Years of the X-Files. And I just thought it was so fascinating because, I mean, I love books and I love the X-Files, so what's not to love? But I thought, it's the beginning of the day. There's still so much to do. I'll come by later, like at the end of the day, and I'll buy your book. Well, that was not very far-sighted of me because when I came by later during the day, your book had been sold out. Not one
Yeah.
copy left.
On
And
I
I remember being so excited for you, but so upset for me because I really wanted to buy it and it was sold out. But I have since read that book, and I love it, and I recommend it to anyone who loves the X-Files or is doesn't even know what the X-Files is. It's a book that really it's a beginner friendly book. So you don't have to be an avid X-Files fan to appreciate that book. But if you are, it's just a bonus.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't believe that it sold out. Because technically it wasn't actually like officially published when FileFest came around. It was due to be published like a few days later, but my publishers agreed to send me some copies. And initially they're like, "Sure, we'll send 20." I was like, "No, I'm at an X Files convention. Send more." So they sent 50, and yeah, it had sold out within like the first few hours, which was an absolute shock. And Annabeth Gish kept telling people they went to get her autograph to go and buy the book, which probably helped. But yeah, it was absolutely mad.
Have did any of the guests buy your book? You don't have to
Give
say
me
to say any names.
give me two
Just
seconds.
okay, okay.
I'll take you on a tour because so I've got a section. I mean, this is my office where I do a lot of my research. So I've got a load of books, and obviously I've got a lot of X-Files books, and that's where this book lived, which I
Yes.
couldn't find because I'd moved everything around. But it's in front of my X-Files book collection are little Lego figures of each of the characters, which were
Ah,
made by Waller Customs, who's doing the X-Files Ideas Lego that's going to come out later this year.
yes,
Um,
the one that we voted for, and it's happening.
yes, yes. But yeah, you asked about people if anyone signed the book. So this is my copy, which
Ah, look at
I got
that.
signed. Frank signed it, and Pat signed it, and Rob Goodwin signed it, and Mitch signed it, and
Ah,
Annabeth signed it, and Nick signed it, and Chris Owen signed it, and yeah, so yeah, just everyone signed it, which is amazing. And Gillian Anderson is going to be at Liverpool Comic Convention this year, so I'm taking that up to get her to sign it as well.
I am so happy for and also a little bit jealous of the fans who are going to Liverpool this year. I've seen the
Yeah.
lineup and I'm like, I want to be there. So like the FOMO is real.
Yeah, yeah. It not to make the FOMO any worse, but I feel like it's going to be awesome.
I mean, I bet. And I am so happy to see this revival of the X-Files in,
Mm.
in the convention world and in this like
Yes.
nerd kingdom, like all of these conventions are now inviting X-Files actors and writers because I mean, they know that X-Files fans are still strong and there's a lot of us and, we bring the money. And of course,
Yes.
they want a piece of that, which is fine by me because the show had the revival aired 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is crazy.
crazy. I mean, the season 11 was in like it aired in 2018. That was like 100 years ago, and still the fandom is so strong. The show is so popular that they are inviting these actors
Yep.
to these new conventions, which I am so for it. So, X-Files book, your whole career, when I was reading about, your career and what it is that you do, and I was thinking, I want to do what Bethan does. Of course, I do sort of my own research for this podcast, and like I read a lot of books and like academic research about the X-Files and fandom. But I lack this academic rigor. And I mean, I'm a social worker, so I have no like connection to this to the thing that you do. So I have two questions.
Yep.
How did you come to do what you do? How did you get on this path? And
Mhm.
also, is there any way that other people can, follow in your footsteps?
I mean, I'll answer the second question first. Yes, I think so. And I will tell you why by answering the first question.
Okay.
So I mean, I've been a fan of the show since like 96, although initially I wasn't. I heard about this science fiction show that was going to appear on our screens, and I read a lot of science fiction. Like my granddad read Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, so I read a lot of those books as well. And I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be rubbish. It's going to take the mick out of science fiction fans. I'm not going to watch it. And then my stepfather watched it and was like, you need to see it. Like you're going to love it. And I did, and I fell down the rabbit hole. Um, and I started off by writing fan fiction. So I'd post fanfic to the BBC Cult TV message boards in the early 2000s when we got the internet. Um, but there was a book that came out. It was an academic book, and I think I picked it up in a charity shop. And it's called "Denying All Knowledge: Reading the X Files" by um, three scholars who were also like really big X Files fan, and they're big names in TV studies work. Anyway, so I picked that up, and I was like, people can do this academically. People can write about television. And then I went to university, and in my final year philosophy dissertation, I wrote about reality and fiction in contemporary culture. And obviously, I used Jose Chung's From Outer Space as one of my case studies, along with The Matrix. And I'd said at that point, I want to write a book about the philosophy of the X Files. Um, and I didn't. Someone else did it first, and it's a very good book. Um, but I didn't. And then I sort of finished my degree and went out into the world of work and stuff. But I was still like writing fan fiction. I was still reading fan fiction. And when I Want to Believe was announced in 2008, I got really active on LiveJournal. So I joined loads of fanfic communities and loads of like meta communities and started writing meta about the X Files. Um, and that was before I think I started the PhD. So I was writing about Jose Chang obviously drew up like from my third year dissertation to talk about some of that. Um, Wrote about Laura Mulvey and the male gaze in relation to Rain King, because obviously, we get Mulder saying, I do not gaze at Scully. And it's like, well, you blatantly do, come on. So I was posting meta and kind of engaging in discussions with other fans. And X-Files fans are notoriously intelligent, so and you know that we will read stuff. We will read academic scholarship, and we'll engage in long, drawn out debates on social media platforms about different things. Um, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought, well, actually, this is really interesting. But also, I'm writing fic about Fowley, and I'm seeing people absolutely hating on her. And why? Like, why are they rewriting all of the wrongs done to Scully over the course of the show, but they're just accepting how Fowley is treated and writing fic where she dies in cruel and unusual ways. And I think there were maybe three or four of us in the X-Files circles on LiveJournal that were writing about Fowley in kind of more nuanced ways. So that's what I decided to do. So I thought about getting into, because I had done my masters at that point as well, and I'd written one of my essays for my masters about fan fiction, and I was like, I want to study this in more detail. It's kind of really interesting. I want to look into it more. So funny enough, I was looking at my PhD application earlier today for completely different reasons, but I decided to apply for a PhD specifically looking at fan fiction and applying a theorist called Stuart Hall's encoding decoding model. So it's part of reception studies that looks at the way audiences like respond to different texts, how they receive them, how they understand them, and things like that. And there's a lot of stuff written about fan fiction based on Henry Jenkins's work. And Henry Jenkins, he's the godfather of fan studies. So he wrote a book called Textual Portraits, where he talked about Star Trek fan fiction in particular, but other stuff as well. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, this is really interesting. But actually, Stuart Hall does something that's really interesting as well. So that was it. I sort of put an application together, and I've just pulled it up here. And this was going back to like 2010. So I've got my principal research interests lie in the field of fan studies and participatory culture. And my PhD examines the way in which issues of gender, as portrayed in the television show The X Files, are addressed in fan fiction. So it kind of draws on gender and fan studies, takes a reception studies approach. And I talk then, and this is my research proposal, this is the application. So I talk about being drawn to this because I've been a fan of the show since the early 90s. I've been involved in fandom. I'm a fanfic writer, and I enjoy kind of creating stories about these characters, but I'm also intrigued by fans' reactions to specific characters. And yeah, so I kind of submitted that and drew a lot on my own experience in fandom. So which is why I said yes, other people can do this, particularly because fan studies now is quite an established field. So when I first applied, it had really been going for like 1992 was the first fan studies texts, really. So it was still a relatively new field while I was applying, but now fans are everywhere. Like that, talking about comic conventions,
Right,
Comic Cons are
right.
massive. So yeah, so other people could definitely follow in my footsteps if they were interested. But yeah, that's how I came to do it. So I did the PhD, wrote a lot while I was writing the PhD about anti-fandom, also, coming from those experiences with Diana Fowley haters, um, and kind of went from there really. So I've presented at a lot of conferences about X Files, fan fiction, fan mixes, um, and other stuff. And it's just kind of gone from there. Like obviously now I write about a lot more, like, so it's not just the X Files. I branch into other areas, but yeah, the X Files like that's how I got into this career, and that's always going to be like what I keep going back to. It's the love of my life.
Yeah, it's the love of your life. It's something I can absolutely relate to, and I just think it's so fascinating that it's like people like you whose work bridges this gap between uh, academia and popular culture. And instead of having, now I am probably going to, you know, make some people very angry when I say this, but rather than, it coming from this sort of stuffy academic world, it is just, these like very like old academics who are just so they have this like tunnel vision, and they don't know anything that's happening outside of their very narrow
Mhm.
field. And when they try to uh, examine and explore something, as like something like the X-Files or Star Trek, something that is popular, and they do it, and they're not doing a very good job because they have this like tunnel vision, and they can't extricate themselves from this like dusty, stuffy world. But instead you have people who go into academia because they're fans of
Mhm.
something in popular culture like the X-Files or Star Trek. And I think that this some may say, oh, it's not objective. It takes the objectivity out of it. First of all, no science is objective. Not even natural
Yep.
science, not even math is objective. Is if you're human, you can never be objective. And second, it doesn't have to be objective when it's something
Mhm.
something like cultural studies. Uh, I think what we should value more in this area is uh, authenticity
Mhm.
and authenticity and transparency and just honesty. And if you have people who are very passionate about a certain subject, and you know that they will try and do their best to do a very good job exploring it in an academic field. So I'm very fascinated by people like you.
I used to have arguments with my supervisor about that objectivity subjectivity divide because he'd be like, "You're writing as a fan. You need to be objective." And I'm like, same as you just said, you cannot be objective. You could be objectively subjective. So I can be aware that I am a fan. So I am positioned as a fan inside that fandom. So I have got experiences that other academics might not have. Those experiences might colour the way that I engage with fans or the way that I do research. But as long as I'm considering those things and as long as I'm being transparent about it, like you said, that's fine. Like I don't you can't be objective about stuff like that, particularly when it's popular culture, like you said, and I've always tried because I've come from fandom, like I want people to read my work, so I don't want to write really, difficult language that's going to act as a barrier. And I try to do that in all of the work that I do, not just the specific fan study stuff. But I'm like, yeah, I want people to engage with this. I want people to read it and go, oh, that's really interesting. Or actually, no, I completely disagree with her, and this is why. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I think more scholarship should try to be accessible. It's one of my real bugbears.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking about all of the all of the academic works that could be very valuable for the
Mhm.
layman, for the regular people to read and to engage with, but it's all behind a paywall.
Yeah,
Uh, and
yeah.
when I was at a studying at a university, I had access to all of these essays and articles.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
even when I was like studying some like social work, I could still go and read articles about something completely different because I was interested in
Yeah.
it, but I had the access, and now I don't have the access anymore, and I don't want to pay the damn fee. So,
Yeah, exactly. No, my advice for that is reach out to the authors. Because if
hmm,
someone gets in touch with me and is like, I really want to read this book chapter, but I can't afford to pay, £150 for the academic prices, I'll just send you a PDF of it. And I think a lot of academics will do that as well because we want our stuff to be read, and we don't get paid for publishing any of it, unless it's like a book.
mm.
Um, so it's like, yeah, if we're not earning any money. It's the publishers that are earning the money, and we want people to read it. So get in touch and be like, can I just please have a copy?
First of all, thank you for this piece of advice. And second of all, that's messed up. How is that? How is that a thing?
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's the entire academic publishing system. So the only money I've had money for like popular books. So I think the fic book that my essay is in, I got paid like I think it was $100 for that. Um, I got paid a small amount for co-editing a couple of collections, but that was because I was a co-editor, so I was like doing all of the admin stuff and reading everything over and commenting and blah 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 blah. Um, but again, that's not a huge amount. I think for royalties for the crowdfunding the future book I co-edited back in 2015, I think I've made less than £100 on royalties. Um, and yeah, you don't get paid at all for journal papers. You used to get a free copy of the hard copy journal sent to you, but that doesn't happen anymore because most of them have moved to online. So you can just download a PDF of your article.
Here's just another uh, just another sort of piece of evidence that writers don't write because we want money. We do it because we love to write and we love
Yeah,
the things that we write about. We're in it for the rush, for this adrenaline rush of, having written something and having someone read it. We don't do it for the money. So if you're thinking
totally.
that, you're gonna become a Stephen King millionaire by writing anything, no. Forget about
Yeah.
it. So about your book. Now, I said before we started recording that next time we meet, I would love to just talk about your book. Um, but just one question. Do you, how do you get permission from whom and from whom to write a book about the X-Files? Like, do you have to email Chris Carter's agent?
No. So what happened with the book? The publishers, so Fayetteville Mafia Press, they've done a lot on pop culture. So they've got books on like Twin Peaks and The Wire and stuff like that. And a friend of mine who's also in X-Files fandom forwarded me a tweet that they'd posted saying they wanted to do a book for the 30th anniversary of the X-Files and to pitch them with ideas. So I dropped them in line and I was like, look, this is me. I'm an academic. This is some of the stuff I've written about the X-Files. Like, I'm a fan of the show, blah, 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 blah. I'd be really interested in writing a book. And I had a Zoom call with them where it was sort of like a very informal interview. They wanted to know what my ideas were, what I talk about, stuff like that. So I was like, I want to talk about like the 30 years of the show. It's an anniversary because it came out in 2023. So I was like, it's an anniversary. I don't just want to focus on the new series, although a lot less has been written about those than the earlier series. But I was like, I'm interested in conspiracies because there's so much conspiracy culture now, which really kind of gelled, particularly with the 2018 revival season. So I was like, I want to talk about that. I want to kind of cover a lot of different stuff. So I'd kind of pitched it as being in three sections talking about, and I've got to look at my copy of the book because I can't remember. So Trust No One, which is the sort of the section on politics, because obviously politics and the X-Files go hand in hand. Then I looked at section 2 was The Truth Is Out There, which looked at issues around kind of reality and fiction. And that drew in like fake news, some of the conspiracy stuff. And then section 3 was I Want to Believe, which looked at some of the stuff beyond just the screen. So gender obviously was a massive one there. I talked about fan fiction, and then I talked about kind of representations of sexuality in the 21st century. So obviously, Mulder and Scully Meet the Way Monster was one that I talked about because there is trans representation in it, but it's not very good. And I talked about the X-Cops episode from season 7 because again, there's like LGB representation, which is also not particularly good. Um, and then section 4 was kind of deny everything. So I brought it back to like the golden age of television, things like the comic books, the kind of transmedia elements of the show, and then obviously the fandom. And they liked that approach. So they sent me a contract and I got on with it. But because I didn't interview anybody, which I would have loved to have done, but it's so difficult trying to get hold of, Chris or um, Frank or like Vince Gilligan because they're all obviously really busy. But because I was doing kind of like textual analysis, I was looking at old magazines because I've got tons in my X-Files corner over there. Looking at fan sites, like using the Wayback Machine to look at some of the really early fan sites. So yeah, so it didn't require kind of permission because it's sort of a popular academic work. So I guess a lot of it, we don't have fair use in the same way as they do in the States, but a lot of it would come under that. So yeah, but luckily that Frank and Chris seem to like it from what they've said. So I'm not overly concerned about not having asked permission to do it.
Um, yeah, thank you for this, because I'm sure that I am not the only one out there, not the only fan out there who is also, considered, uh, ideas of writing a book about the X-Files. Of course, there is a huge, huge leap between just thinking about it and doing it, let alone getting it published. But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at your room and the light in your, I think it's like your closet.
Oh, is it?
Uh
Yeah,
yeah, the light, the way it the light it so intersects, it makes it look like an X, like
X,
from the
yeah.
X.
What that wasn't intentional. It's because I'm up in the attic, so I've got a sloping ceiling. So there's a
Uh
straight light, and then the ceiling slopes. But
yeah.
actually, that yeah, until you
Yeah,
said that, I had noticed.
it just adds to the atmosphere.
It does.
Uh so okay, like I said before, I'm going to read a lot from my Google Doc, and that is because a lot of the questions I have for you come from your essay in this book. The book is called Why Fanfiction is Taking Over the World by Anne Jamison. And it's this very thick book written, and there's like chapters written by different authors about different history of fan fiction, different aspects of fan fiction. And there is one chapter that is written by Amber Benson, who is Dawn on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I think is amazing. But your chapter is the one that we're going to talk about today, and it's Mulder and Scully versus the G Woman and the Fowl one. And I came across, first of all, I bought this book for when I was doing research for my podcast. I did an episode about queer ships. So
Nice.
a year ago, a little more than a year ago, there was this drama on Twitter when some X-Files fans were being very homophobic and saying like, no,
Mhm.
you cannot say that Mulder is gay or Scully is bi, like, ah. And that made me so mad. And my podcast is about the history of the fandom, and I didn't want to do like a reaction content, but I thought that it's important that I just, give my 2 cents on the subject and put a stop to this whole nonsense. And so the episode I made was called Queer Ships and the Right to Slash Your Favorite Characters. And it's where I just debunk most of the claims that like you cannot don't say gay in fandom.
Yeah.
And that's where I bought when I bought this book, because in this chapter, you not only are you advocating for Diana Fowley, but you are writing about fan fiction slash fiction about Fowley and Scully.
Yep.
And I just thought it was such a fascinating pairing and subject. I didn't know that this pairing even existed, and I have been in the fandom for a long time. But that's because, I have my own slash pairing that I can't get enough of. So, but and I read it, and there was so much. I just love this perspective that you have, that this fan fiction, these fanfic authors, they don't just like sanctify Scully, like, oh, she is the best character on the show, and any character that hurts her must die. And just automatically vilify Fowley just for being there. But you take a look at these authors, fanfic authors, they take these very complex female characters who exist within this patriarchal structure of the FBI and the government, and they both assign these different roles by the institution. And on the show, these they have to be antagonistic towards each other. But these fanfic authors, they do something different with it. They just make them interact in a different way and try and find complexities and ways that these characters could actually like each other, or get to know each other in a different way. That is not just this binary like hero villain. And so I am going to, let's see, I am going to read a quote. So I'm going to cut this part out, by the way, when I'm editing. So you're right. You continue to write that writing fan fiction is an act of resistance by the fans against the showrunners. And I quote, Femslash featuring Fowley, fanfic in which a same-sex relationship between another female character shown as canonically heterosexual is perhaps the most resistive of all, end quote. And you mean it in a way that it resists the canon that is dictated by the showrunner and the writers. And I thought it was, first of all, I agree with you. And second, I would actually like take it even further, because not only is this an act of resisting the canon by Chris Carter, but it's an act of resisting the canon by the fandom majority. It's
Yeah. It's that's the thing. That's what I really like about Scully Fowley Femslash in particular, because like fans are dedicated. We know that X-Files fans and shippers in particular are very dedicated, and it probably helps that I was never a shipper. I've always been a no Romo, so I don't have that same kind of, oh my God, Scully and Mulder, but they're destined for each other. So Fowley coming in being, this love interest is we need to kill her. I've never had that, and that is, kind of a bit reductive of me to say, but you know what I mean. So I kind of really like the fact that you've got this small, and it is a small number of fans, but this small number of fans kind of setting up the battlements and being, no, we see these as two complex female characters, and actually we disagree with the rest of the fandom. We don't hate Fowley. We think she's been chronically underused and badly treated, and we are going to fix that. Because the amount of hate you'd get even as a fic writer writing Scully and Fowley was crazy, because fans are so dedicated to the ship. So it is. So I think there's multiple levels of resistance going on there. Like you said, not just against the canon, from Mulder and Scully are supposed to be together, but about like against the fans that want Mulder and Scully to be together, but also about that kind of broader culture of the FBI or law enforcement. It's there's two female characters that have always been looked down upon, I think, by quite a lot of their male colleagues and superiors. So to have that, they're finding an oasis with each other to kind of go out and battle that. And I think that extends beyond the fiction. It extends beyond the television screen into real life, because we all know the statistics about how women are treated in the workplace and stuff like that, particularly in a very patriarchal institution like the FBI or the police force. So yeah, and you can see that resistance in responses to fanfic with Scully and Fowley together. So yeah, no, I think I really like it. I really like it.
Well, and I am also I'm not an MSR shipper, and I've always tried to sort of rebel against this dominance of MSR in the fan discourse. And in my experience, it seems like it's I don't know if it's more dominant now than it was before. Obviously, Mulder and Scully did get together by the end of the show, so like MSR won, but it still doesn't mean that we have to stop experimenting and stop asking questions, because these are characters that they're so well written and so complex, and the world that they inhabit is so complex that these characters, they're not stagnant. They don't feel like, you've written a character and that's it. They're stagnant. They're sort of growing and changing with us. They're growing and changing as we individual fans are growing, and also as the society changes. And so, just because Mulder and Scully are, officially canon, it doesn't mean that we get to stop, slashing them with different characters, or like asking questions about their sexuality. And
exactly.
And
particularly now that, like, oh, sorry. No, I was thinking, like, paratextually, like Gillian has, talked fairly recently about her own bisexual experiences. So I think maybe that also can play into the idea that, yeah, okay, well, Scully could be bi. And the number of fans that are like, Gillian Hansen made me gay, like in a, that's a huge sort of meme in the fandom. So I'm like, well, we've got that. You can't then turn around and be like, no, Scully is definitely straight. There's no way she could be bisexual, or Mulder is definitely straight. He couldn't be gay. Because they could be, and that's what fanfic is there for, is to experiment and play around with these characters. But what I'd like to do, I mean, I'd be really interested now, because I think in the early days, certainly, when I was first on LiveJournal, so we're talking like nearly 20 years ago, I was in my early to mid 20s, and some of the writers who were writing Scully Fowley fic were older. They were sort of middle-aged women, so they had a different perspective to us younger fans. And I'd be really intrigued now to see what the fans who hated Fowley in their 20s feel about her now, having an extra 20 years of real life experience, whether they'd be more inclined to sympathise with her, even if they still, wanted Mulder and Scully to get together. That's a piece of audience research I'd quite like to do.
Yes, yes to all of it. And if you ever get around to, I know that you would do these, like have these questionnaires for fans,
Yep.
Especially for your book. And if you do something like that, I would so be interested in reading that.
Awesome.
So moving on, let's see, we talked about resisting the canon. Okay, so I think this act of resistance is, and now I'm reading again from the doc. Okay, it's one of the reasons I think that enemies to lovers ships are so alluring, and in the X-Files world, it would be Mulder and Krychek and Scully and Fowley, and it's because in these enemies to lovers we have, and I talked about it before, but you have two characters who are sort of told by their superiors and told by the power structures, you're supposed to hate each other, you're supposed to work against each other, and so they have no agency in that. And so when fans instead take them from the canon, and they let these characters rebel against their superiors, rebel against Cancer Man or the FBI in general, and let these characters fall in love or create their own destiny. And I think that one of the reasons why we're drawn to to enemies to lovers. It's this act of rebellion that maybe I'm like projecting from the real world, because there's so much I would like to rebel against in the real world.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that one. Yeah, no, I think it makes sense because, like, thinking about Scully and Fowley in particular, we we know Fowley has an agenda that's set by Cancerman and the Syndicate, but why does she go along with it? Like, that's never explained in the show. And it's one of the things that I've always found really interesting is why would she go along with that? What have they got over her? What power do they hold that mean she is actively trying to, undermine Mulder and the X-Files and stuff? And Scully obviously is going to push back against that because she, loves Mulder platonically, romantically, whatever you kind of wherever side of that debate you fall. I'm like, well, what if? And that's one of the things I love about fanfic. You can answer that what if. What if Scully found out that Cancerman was holding something over Fowley, like, I'm gonna make something up. She was I don't know, fostered out, she was put into care, and she was in a really abusive family, and she turned to prostitution to make it out of poverty and get into the FBI. So Cancerman is now holding that over her. Like, what if Scully found that out? Like, that would surely change Scully's opinion and attitude towards Fowley, because we know Scully is an empathetic character. We know she's got a strong sense of right and wrong. So then, what if Scully and Fowley started working together to undermine the syndicate? And it's stuff like that. I'm like, that is what's really interesting. It's this rebellion, and it comes back a little bit as well, I think, to that element of resistance. Like, fans then rebel against what the creators are telling us. And sometimes that works really well, because as much as we all love Chris, there were some things that weren't as good, and some things that got confused in the timeline as the seasons went on. So we can rebel against that as fans. We know these characters, and we can kind of help them rebel against the narrative structures that they're bound by, but we can also rebel against those narrative structures as fans. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. And you mentioned, Chris Carter having written some things that, a lot of fans may be disagreeing with, and it's just, and it's not like, it's not an indictment,
Mm.
or even like a very harsh criticism. It's just the reality of, writers are human. And Chris has, he said that Mulder and Scully are reflections of his own dichotomy, like, his own struggle between trying to believe and wanting to believe and being a skeptic. And he put so much of his own, like, himself in these characters. And he's human, and there are so many writers on that show who are also human, are also bringing their own perspectives and their own biases and their own, their own flaws and blind spots. And how many times, when I write a story and someone reads it and they say, "Oh, this part that you wrote is very fascinating. This is such interesting subtext," and I'm like, "I haven't even considered that." It's like,
Yep.
so I think it's only human for writers to, err in some ways, or falter in some
Mm.
ways, and for fans to respectfully, without, sending any death wishes,
Yeah.
to comment on that and try to maybe, rectify that in their own text, in fan fiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely
Mm.
makes sense what you said.
I think, I mean, I know we focused in on Scully and Fowley, but I think you get that with that sense of what if with, like, Scully and Samantha Mulder Femslash.
Mm.
What if Mulder was the one that was taken and Samantha's the one that's left to find out what happened to him? What would happen if Samantha was the FBI's most unwanted down in the basement, and we get this UST, this unresolved sexual tension between Samantha and Dana Scully. Like, there's that what if going on, which is
Right.
there's so many things that you can do to play around with the characters. So that might, it might not work with the sort of the gender flip of Mulder being the the believer and the kind of the more empathetic, emotional one. But you would then just have two female characters in the FBI in the 90s in a very patriarchal environment where one of them believes that her brother's been abducted by aliens. So you've got this kind of stereotypical, oh, feminine, emotional weirdo against the female scientist, rational person. So so there's so many things that fanfic lets us do. Not just in a sense of rebelling against the narrative structures or resisting the canon, but letting us explore and consider other things, which I think is great. And I think it would be really boring if we could only take what was in the canon as gospel and not play around with it. It's like, the argument that Mulder can't be gay. It's like, why not?
Yeah.
And what harm does it do if he is gay? I mean, he's a fictional character at the end of the day. He's not real.
Exactly. He's not real. Like, take a chill pill, people. I think I'm thinking about that video of Mark Hamill at a convention, and he was talking about how some fans were asking him, is Luke Skywalker gay? And Mark Hamill said, look, if you think he's gay, then he's gay.
Yep.
Like, and that's it. And
Yeah.
I think it would be very boring not to just, be content and just take as gospel what the text says, but also to just completely obey what the majority of the fandom just, holds on to. Like, Mulder and Scully are supposed to be together. Diana Fowley is the literal devil. Like, they're just, it would be like, there is no one in the fandom who has the authority to dictate what other fans should think and feel. That's literally a dictatorship, and the fandom, that's not what the fandom is supposed to be about. And there are some, fan spaces where I would not be comfortable saying these things, and these theories that Mulder could be gay with Krychek and Scully could be gay with Fowley. And I think it's deeply, deeply sad that there's still like spaces, certain groups, certain forums where you just kind of feel instinctually that, don't ask, don't tell,
Yeah.
And so I think it's sad. But now it's a question to you, who's been in the fandom for longer than me and also studied it. Do you think that the fandom in general has gotten more accepting of, more diverse in terms of non-het, like gay and bisexual and trans fans and interpretations of these characters, or less?
It's a tricky one because I think to a point it was getting more and more accepting. And I could probably pull up some data from the questionnaires I circulated when I was doing the research. And then this would be a good, when was I doing it? This would be a good like 10 years or so ago. But I could pull up the demographics of the respondents and give you exact numbers. But I feel like society has become less accepting, and that inevitably spills over into fandom spaces because fandom spaces are made up of people that are part of the society. And we're seeing it. And like I said earlier, I did a lot of work on sort of toxicity, digital dislike, hatred online. And I'd say in the last decade, things seem to be getting worse. So there was Gamergate in 2014, where, very brief summary, a female video games journalist was accused of sleeping with a male journalist in order to get good reviews for a game that she'd created. And then that kind of spiraled into death threats and rape threats being sent to a variety of female games producers and critics. And they were doxxed and stuff like that. And obviously, Donald Trump becoming president of the United States twice has made it much more acceptable, I think, to be very vocal about bigoted beliefs. And I think that is spilling over into fandom circles. And I don't spend a lot of time in fandom circles anymore I tend to do a lot more kind of individual fandom, or I'll talk about it with my friends on like my Bluesky account or my Facebook or in real life, rather than going onto any forums and stuff. Um, and it's a tricky one because I feel like fandom, particularly media fandom, like we've historically been the ones that were laughed at. You know, it was the Star Trek fans, and there was that William Shatner Saturday Night Live sketch where he tells a room full of Star Trek fans to, go and get a life, get out of your parents' basements, kind of thing. So I feel like we've historically been the ones that have been misaligned. So to see some members of the fandom taking on and expressing those really bigoted views and being really transphobic or homophobic or racist is wrong. I mean, it's wrong anyway, but I feel like, particularly in terms of media fandom, it's wrong. So that wasn't a very positive answer, I feel like.
I think what we're out here after here is just honesty, and it doesn't have to be positive. The truth isn't always positive, and if this is how things are and this is how you perceive them to be,
Mm.
then it's just, I don't know, just accepting this fact and trying to work towards something better.
Yeah. I've got a friend of mine, she's a very, very good fan studies scholar, Rukmini Pandey. She's in India, and she's written a lot about racism and fandom, kind of broadly, not I don't know if I've never had a conversation with her about the X-Files, so I don't know if she's an X-Files fan, but she talks a lot about racism in fandom, and she was massively piled on Twitter. There was discourse about antis in, fandom more generally, and she'd kind of engaged with that and was thinking about, okay, the way that we talk about anti-fans in scholarship was quite different to the way that fans were talking about antis in fandom discourse. And she was piled on like horrifically on social media because she got it wrong and she can't call herself a fan and she shouldn't be in these spaces and blah 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 blah. It's like, no, no, everyone should be allowed in fandom spaces. You might disagree with people, but that doesn't mean you resort to death threats or pylons or racism. And it does feel like it is getting that way more generally. Like I said, I can't speak specifically to the X-Files fandom just because I'm not really in those spaces anymore.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I f- I wouldn't say, like, I'm not trying to come up with a solution or an answer to something as huge and as an entire subculture, but I am I have a lot of friends and just, followers, mutuals on social media, on Instagram, who are X-Files fans, and they are, first of all, they're either young, like in their 20s, or, sometimes like late teens, and they are queer
Mhm.
in one way or different ways. And they love the X-Files, and and so it's like it's like in 1984 by George Orwell. The
Yeah.
hope is, if there's any hope, it's in the proles. It's like, if it's any hope, it's in these young queer fans
Yep.
uh, who love the show, but and they are, because they have this different perspective, they take this show and they take these characters, and then they, put them through an entire different prism, and they come with like perspectives on these characters that I haven't even considered, and maybe some older fans haven't considered, some straight fans haven't considered. And it makes me hopeful, and I want this fandom. I mean, this podcast is about the OG fans, but I want this fandom to be accepting of this young blood, these young
Mhm.
fans who come with these fresh takes on the characters. Uh, so my hope is there.
Yeah. I hope so. And I've just pulled up my one of the questionnaires, and so I asked, because I asked demographic information. So I asked about your sexuality. So I had this one I love. Um, so someone said 90% straight, but aren't we all just a little bit pan or bi? And I love that. I had asexual, aromantic, bisexual, demisexual. See what else I can find. gay, heteroflexible, still working out if I'm bi or gay, pansexual, polysexual, queer, lots of queer, questioning but not straight. Someone said so hard to choose with a winky face. Straight but totally gay for Scully. Obviously, I think a lot of people would agree with that. And I kind of had very few comments. Like there was one who said like no labels, please. Which okay, there may be reasons for that. But it is nice to see that range of sexuality, but also gender identities as well, because I also asked about gender identity. So I had several people that said I'm non-binary, gender fluid, I'm gender queer. I kind of present as a woman, because it's convenient, but actually I don't care. So I think we are. I think, and this is probably going to directly contradict what I just said, but there are a lot more, and I think you're right, it does relate to age quite a lot of the time, but there are a lot more queer people in fandoms. Um, but then we also still have really horrific spaces where that's like just absolutely ridiculed. But yeah, I mean, I hope we get more acceptance. I hope we get more people coming through that are LGBTQ plus and doing really interesting things with the characters and being really vocal and proud about it, because that's awesome. Like we need more of that. And that's where I think things like Netflix and Disney Plus come in really useful, because a lot of young people, particularly during the pandemic, got into the X-Files. And it's like, yes, that's what we want. We want new blood coming in.
As much as I criticize streaming and streaming platforms and the model of streaming, and I can talk for hours about that, you cannot deny the service it has done to but
Mhm.
introducing younger fans to like shows like the X-Files, Buffy, and other cult shows that are no longer on TV. And not everyone has I don't know, do people even have stations anymore? But it has certainly streaming is not cheap, but it has certainly
No.
democratized and made accessible
Mm.
this old media to a younger
Yeah.
generation of fans.
Massively. I spoke at a media studies student conference a couple of weeks ago. So it was A-level media studies students. They're like 16 to 18. And I introduced myself as a fan. I was like, this is what I do, and I talk about this, but I'm an X-Files fan. And I had someone come up to me afterwards, they're like, oh, I've just started watching the X-Files. I was like, amazing. She's like, what fan fiction do you write? I was like, well, I'm not going to give you my name, but it's the same handle I use on all of my social media platforms. So if you search that in Exiles, you will see what I write. And I was just like, I love the fact that there are younger people coming through and not only watching the show, but wanting to read fic and then hopefully write
Yeah.
fic. It's lovely. Although it makes me feel old.
I've encountered these like takes by, and this was also years ago, someone young, and this not this fandom, but like someone in some anime fandom or something. Oh, old people shouldn't be writing fan fiction. Like, what are you, 40 and you still write fan fiction? And the responses to those takes were like, sit down, child. You write fan fiction. You are allowed to write fan fiction thanks to us because we were there who started it, and we were derided for it and ridiculed for it. And it wasn't until like later, like maybe recent years, that fan fiction has, well, I wouldn't say lost its stigma, but it's definitely been in a way just destigmatized and has been more
Yeah.
acceptable in the mainstream, even though some people will still use fan fiction as a slur.
Yeah.
But like, no, you, if you're 15 or 20 and you write fan fiction, you should be thanking us. You should not be saying that we're not allowed to write fan fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a thing that was going around Tumblr a while back that was like young fans asking, why are people writing things like I don't own these characters? And it's like, oh, sweet summer child, you don't know the history of the cease and desist letters that spanned fandom. So yeah, and I think that's really interesting because there is a specific history to fandom and fan fiction in particular that, I mean, we still talk about it in fan studies, but a lot of younger fans perhaps don't know that. So they don't have that nuance and the understanding of what us old folk did back in the day.
Bethan, do you mind if we take a little break? I need to fill up my glass with some more
Yeah, go
water.
for it.
I'll be back in like 2 minutes. That's smart.
Yeah,
You have a whole thermos. I just have this
yeah, I
glass.
came prepared with like 2 bottles.
Mm, that's smart. Um, so about fan fiction, I have the the sort of prevailing view of fan fiction in the mainstream is that fan fiction is a good training for becoming a real author. That you write fan fiction, you don't have to come up with a world. You have these characters that have been established, and then you get to sort of learn how to write and be an author. But then you grow up and you graduate from fan fiction and you write real real literature. And even though it can be true, for some people, I certainly have learned a lot by writing fan fiction. And I guess some people do, move on from fan fiction to writing original works. Uh, Even though it can be true, it's not the truth. Uh, so plenty there. I mean, I've read so many stories by authors who are just so talented and write so beautifully. And as far as I'm concerned, they weren't interested in writing their own original works. They were just happy creating within this world and playing with the characters they love. So I
Yeah.
don't know, what's your take on it?
I agree, and I've got some thoughts. So there's a really good book by an academic called Sheena Pugh, called Fan Fiction, the Democratic Genre. And she talks about there being kind of two main reasons for people to write fanfic. So it's either they want more of the story or they want more from the story. So more of would be things like if you think about the X-Files, I want more Monster of the Week episodes that were set after season 11. So you'd write Monster of the Week. Or I want more of the, I don't know, backstory to the syndicate or, stuff like that. So it would be kind of writing in line with canon. So you're creating more story set in that universe. More from is where things like slash would come into it. So you want more from the fictional universe. So you're getting involved in like maybe character motivations and like backstories and alternate universe fic and stuff like that. And I really like that positioning. I like Sheena Pugh's argument in that. Um, and what I find really interesting is there's more academic scholarship now that's looking not in fan studies necessarily, but that's looking at fan fiction as a pedagogical tool. So yes, it can help you to learn how to write, and this is how fan fiction could be used in an English literature, English language class, for example, to get your students thinking about structure, narrative, blah 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 blah. But I feel like it's a more accepting view of fanfic, but it's still couched within a neoliberal context. It's like this is a good thing because you can then graduate and make money. It's like you're not you're not doing it because you love it. What purpose does love have in a neoliberal society? It doesn't. You need to go out there and make money. So there is this idea, and I think you're right, that fanfic is being dismissed less, but that's because it's being used as a way to tell people they can make money by being a writer, which we've already established is very, very unlikely. And yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's yeah, it's this neoliberalist idea of taking the things that you love and making money out of it. And I feel like that's not the purpose of fic in the first place. And obviously there's, the famous examples, 50 Shades of Grey being, starting life. I have read that so many times because I've written about it. But obviously that started life as Twilight fan fiction and then it was pulled to publish. And same happened with the One Direction fic that was published on Wattpad, that was pulled and then published as original work. But even still, that's vanishingly rare. And I know so many really, really talented writers that just they haven't got any interest in publishing their own work. Or if they have, it's in a completely different genre or a completely different style. Like I write original fiction, but it's flash fiction. It's stories that are like 250 words long, set in the Welsh valleys where I live. Completely different to writing stories about Mulder and Scully. So yeah, there's more acceptance, but I think it's still within a very specific context.
Yes, yes to all of that. I mean, we can have a whole discussion about this whole hustle culture, monetize your hobbies. I tried
Mhm.
and I crashed and I burned. I had my own company and I lost money on that company trying to monetize my hobby. And I thought, and I said, you know
Yeah.
what? No, I'm not going to do that anymore. And so we can have the conversation about that also. And it's also spills into the, late stage capitalism and gig economy and how now having a stable income isn't enough. And so you have to monetize every aspect of your life. And especially since since the pandemic and working from home and the lines between work life and life has blurred so
Mhm.
much that you can technically monetize anything in your life, but should you? Would you want
Exactly.
to? And
Yeah.
also, I just hate this sort of dogma that art has to serve a purpose. And fan fiction, like fan fiction is art, so fan fiction has to serve a purpose in order to be legitimate, in order to
Yeah.
to justify its existence. It has to have a
Mm.
purpose. Art doesn't have to have a purpose. It just is. It's the only art's only purpose is to make the artist happy, is to help us express our feelings and connect with other people. If art has a purpose, it's that. Everything
Mhm.
else is secondary. Whether like you're making money off of it or not, it's not its purpose.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
And which also brings me, I also wanted to bring up 50 Shades of Grey. I think I think it just gives fan fiction and fan fiction authors bad rep. That, the only, I mean, it's not the only fanfic that made it into, became published as a real book. There were some other like romance books in the same genre, but it's just giving us such bad rep that the most famous fan fiction to make it out into the real literature is something like 50 Shades of Grey, and it's just like it's not doing it's doing such a disservice to fan fiction authors everywhere. Like there's so many stories that I read that are better than most legitimate books I've read.
Mhm.
uh, but they're just fan fiction, and most people won't read them.
Yeah, which yeah, that and that really annoys me as well. And like I said, I've written about 50 Shades of Grey because obviously I've written about 50 Shades of Grey. Um, but the number of people that were like, of all the pieces of fan fiction to be pulled to publish, why was it this one? And there were so many people from within fan communities going, this is shit. There's much better fic out there. Like, why did they choose this one? Like, even in Twilight fandom, there is much better fan fiction.
Exactly.
And there's potentially a range of reasons we could go into for why that was chosen over others. Um, but yeah, and it does, it was like, oh, it's mummy porn, and it just kind of consolidated that idea that female fan fiction writers are sex-starved maniacs that are lusting over fictional characters. It's like, well, no, we're not. But even if we were, so what?
So
Like
what?
that's and we get into arguments then about female sexuality being dismissed, and which I won't go into. But yeah, there's
Uh, there's so much to be said there. But like
yeah.
just in terms of just okay, yeah, 50 Shades, it's smut. It's salacious and it's like
Mm.
naughty, and that's why it got published. But like there. smut everywhere in fan fiction, and a lot of it is much better written than Fifty Shades of Grey. Like I've read so many smutty stories that are just like they're well written and they're fun
Yeah.
and we're talking about subjects like content warning, like BDSM and like consent and abusive relationships. Like this is a horrible representation of both smut in fan fiction and BDSM relationships. So there are fan fiction stories that deal with that so much better, but they never got to become best-selling books.
Yeah. But then
Yeah.
I wonder also if there's a question of ethics around it because, and I wrote a journal article about this, because fan fiction quite often is a communal practice. So you might post chapter one and then you'll get comments from readers, or you might write a draft and then send it to your beta reader and they'll make comments on it. So it's not writing in the same way that maybe Stephen King would go and write a novel. So you then when you pull that to publish it, it's not only your work that you're using, you're kind of exploiting the labor of other fans who have given you that labor for free because they enjoyed your work. So I wonder whether there's a question there about not just the quality of the work, but the morality of the writer and whether they feel it's ethical to, take that and be like, right, I'm going to publish this and I'm going to make the money off it, even though I had so many comments and stuff off other readers. Which I think is an interesting debate that certainly I think in mainstream discourse got completely sidelined because it was just porn for women that
Right.
started life as vampire fan fiction.
There is definitely, I mean, it's definitely a question of solidarity between fans and within the fandom. And yes, and
Mhm.
uh, I know that the author of the X-Files Perry Healigan book, the one that got
Mhm.
great reviews and is sort of a sequel to season 11, I haven't read it, but the author is a fanfic author. She used to write fan fiction, and I think it's great that a fanfic author got a chance to write like a real canonical book for the X-Files. But it wasn't work of fan fiction. She wrote a book as a
Mhm.
book.
Yeah,
As a fanfic author, I would have, qualms about releasing something I wrote that was a fan fiction, originally, and just, completely like flipping off all the fans who did give me feedback and who did read it, who got to read it for free. And then, I'm pulling it off all the platforms and I'm
Mhm.
publishing it. So there is definitely a conversation to be had about solidarity
Yeah,
because, we're all broke here.
yeah,
We're all like hundreds and thousands of words written for nothing just because we love doing it.
exactly.
Yeah. Uh, there's one last thing in my doc that I mean it's not one last thing, but you also write in this essay that one reason Slash is appealing as a genre is that an equal relationship between a man and a woman is not possible in the patriarchal society, and Slash between men enables writers to examine relationships between characters as equals. End quote. And you also question whether Scully and Fowley are equals within the hierarchy of the FBI and if a relationship between them can be truly equal. So three points. First of all, the first point that you make that a relationship between a man and a woman can never be equal in a patriarchal society is a very depressing notion. I am thinking about that scene in the book The Handmaid's Tale
Mm,
when the main character she talks about flashes back to before Gilead, and she's talks about how when they first sort of the first thing that they did to strip women of their rights, I don't remember what it was, but like they couldn't have credit cards or have bank accounts or
yeah,
something
bank
like that.
accounts.
Yeah, and her husband says, and like she's panicking, and her husband says, "That's okay. I'll still take care of you." And that was sort of, that was such a crushing moment for her, because she realized that in that instant, they were no longer equals. She said, like, we are no longer each other's, I am his. And it's a depressing notion that, so much of, you can, a man and a woman can love each other and be in a loving relationship, but so much of their relationship is dependent on politics and laws. And if something changes outside, how it can affect the dynamic inside the house.
Totally. It's, I mean, even thinking like in the contemporary moment, there's still gender pay gaps. So if you've got, a man who's earning more than a woman for essentially the same job, can you have equality there? Thinking about things like Roe versus Wade being overturned, you've suddenly got a massive imbalance, because if you get pregnant and you don't want a child, but your husband or your partner does, well, there's no equality there. And I feel like, I mean, current politics obviously is playing a massive factor in that. But even in the small ways, I kind of feel like we're still not there yet, because we're in a patriarchal society. And it's just depressing as hell. Like it's, even if in your own partnership everything is 100% equal, the fact that it's a patriarchal society means that socially or structurally it is not equal. Even when it comes down to comments like, oh, so who's going to look after the baby? I'm assuming the mother is going to stay at home and dad will go to work. It's like, well, not necessarily. And then it potentially is harmful to men as well, because if they wanted to become a stay-at-home dad and the woman would go to work, well, suddenly they're being emasculated. So there are impacts for both men and women, but I think, heterosexual relationships I feel like inherently not equal within a patriarchal construct.
Patriarchy hurts both men and women, but it will hurt women first and more before it will hurt men a lot. So follow-up question to that is, and feel free to answer it or don't. Do you think that within the patriarchal structure of the X-Files, which is what I love about the X-Files tangent is, it's not that it's a realistic portrayal of the FBI, but it's a very realistic portrayal of the patriarchal structure of our society. Here you have basically a cabal of these white old men who someone on Twitter, I got in an argument with someone on Twitter, so they write these mustachio twirling sort of one-dimensional villains and you call them realistic. Well, I'm sorry, but most villains in real life are these mustachio twirling one-dimensional monsters. Like, have you read the news lately?
Yeah, exactly.
So they do such a good job of showing this structure and showing how Scully, a woman, is trying to navigate and just to stay alive in that structure. And so my question is Mulder and Scully's relationship truly equal within that structure?
It kind of pains me to say it, but I don't think it is. I mean, there's obviously, when Chris was writing them, he kind of switched those gender stereotypes. So Scully is rational and she's the scientist, and Mulder is the more emotional one. He's the believer, and he gets ridiculed as a result of that. He's got the nickname Spooky Mulder, although I don't know if it was Samantha Mulder rather than Fox Mulder, I don't think the nickname would be Spooky. I think it would be something much worse and specifically gendered. So I think the fact that Mulder, he's still recognized as having his kind of intelligence and abilities are recognized, even though he is spooky and his methods might be unusual. If the roles were reversed and it was, Scully doing that, or like I said, Samantha Mulder, I think it would, they would be ridiculed far, far more than Mulder is. And I think I'm going to go on a slight tangent.
We love
But
tangents here on this podcast.
but there's a really nice, oh, I want to say it's in I'm going to butcher the episode title. Uh, Schizogyny in season 3. Uh, I'm just going to double check X-Files. Where the yeah, no, it's not. It's not that one. Which one am I thinking of? It's not. Oh my goodness! It's the one where there's that weird like eclipse stars alignment thing happening, and young Ryan Reynolds was in it.
You're right. Oh
Um,
God, what's
oh,
the
what the hell
title?
is it?
It's a
Ryan Reynolds. I'm going to find it now. That's
yeah.
going to
I know
really,
it's a popular
yeah,
episode.
Syzygy.
Syzygy,
I,
yes.
I knew it started with an S and ended with a
Yes.
Y. Yeah, so in Syzygy, you've kind of got that comment that Mulder gets in the car to drive, and Scully is like, "Why do you always drive?" And he's like, "I'm never sure that your little feet could touch the pedals." And although that's done, I kind of guess tongue in cheek because the planetary alignment is messing with Mulder and Scully. I think that is still quite a nice comment because Scully doesn't often drive. Scully doesn't have a desk. That's a big plot point in Never Again. Um, and that isn't necessarily Mulder's choice, but it's part of that patriarchal structure within the FBI that, with what 5 seasons in, and Dana Scully, who is one half of the X Files, still does not have her own desk. So I don't think, even if they see each other as equals, I think within that broader structure, they're not. Again, like we were saying about that patriarchal society, the relationship might be equal, but the broader structures that it exists within are not, which ultimately impacts that relationship itself.
Yeah, and I guess it would be a devastating perspective for any fan of the show because we love these characters and we want them to be equal
Yeah,
and we want Mulder to be an ally to woman cause and but maybe
yeah.
especially for shippers because they ship them. Uh, but it's an interesting what you say is very interesting because when Scully comes in on the X-Files, Mulder is her superior. It's
Mhm.
his division. He sort of opened it or reopened it.
Mm.
And even though she is, like you said, she's one half of the X-Files, he's sort of still in charge of what
Mm.
cases they choose, what, he's the one who chooses the cases and, where they go. And he will always often tell her, like, Scully, pack your bag, we're leaving like
Yeah.
in the morning. And it's just like, okay, in the first season, I understand she just came in, but like 5 seasons in, and he's still sort of saying, look, because the X-Files is his baby. And I guess we can dissect it through just character lens, like it's a character
Mhm.
flaw. Like Mulder he's so like, focused on his
Yeah.
quest that it's not just because, he's a man and he dismisses her because she's a woman, or it's just that
Mm.
it's his baby, it's his quest, and he really wants to like solve this case. And so everything else
Yeah.
takes a back seat. And so he doesn't consider Scully's feelings because of that. But it's also because he is allowed to do that within the
Mhm.
structure. And what's interesting is how this changes in season 8 when Doggett comes in. And Doggett is much more this sort of stereotypical macho man.
Yeah.
But Scully is now the Mulder. She is now in charge of the X-Files. She is the one who's choosing all the case files, and he's the new Scully. And you can see both. You can see this sort of there's also this power struggle because she's trying to hide her pregnancy, a very feminine thing, and but at the same time, she is now trying to be the believer. She's the reluctant believer, so she's like putting on Mulder's costume, and you can see in the cases that they have that they go into this sheriff's office and the sheriff immediately dismisses Scully because she's a woman and because she comes up with these crazy theories. And they immediately go to Doggett because he's a man and because he's an ex-cop and he, has this air of authority, even though Scully is the one who is the boss. So,
Yep. And also, I think there's well, one of the issues that I've got with sort of the later seasons after David Duchovny left the show is that Scully suddenly seems to become more emotional, and okay, you could put that down to pregnancy hormones, but it really, I don't know, and I think a lot of fans felt that as well. It's like suddenly, she's been a badass for like the entire 7 seasons up until this point. She's fought off monsters, both literal and metaphorical, but now suddenly she's just almost becoming, she's fading into the background a bit. She's becoming far more emotional, which, yeah, again, I think a lot of people had issues with that representation. But I'm thinking even in, and I think it's kind of important to caveat that certainly in the early seasons, before, well, up until 2002 when the show first went off the air, there was a very different kind of context for the show. Whereas, now we are slash have been making steps towards gender equality. We are seeing more women in positions of power, in various different sectors. So there is that caveat that, the relationship isn't necessarily equal, but that is at least partly because of the time in which it was written. But I was just trying to think, like in seasons 10 and 11, we still don't see Scully in perhaps a really powerful, influential position. Like obviously she's a doctor, but she's sort of practicing medicine. She's not, the chair of a department or leading, I don't know, neurological surgery or whatever. And thinking about the not the Waymaster episode, the no, it is the Waymaster episode where Guy is recounting to Mulder his experience of like seeing Scully in the mobile phone shop. Like that is still massively sexualized. And I don't know, would they have done that with Mulder? Like we see him tripping, obviously on mushrooms later on, but it's very much Scully that is being sexualized by a whale lizard in that episode.
That is true. On the other hand, throughout the original run, Scully is always was this like unusual sex symbol because she almost never undressed. She was always like had layers and layers of clothes on her, and yet she was the sex symbol. And there were certain like instances in the original run where she would disrobe, and that would usually be like show her like she's very vulnerable. It wasn't like sexualize it, more like show her vulnerability and show that like when Cancer Man bought her this, very revealing dress, it wasn't sort of shown in a positive light. Yet Mulder was the one who was wearing Speedos and walking around half naked. Like, yeah, this scene definitely needed you to be half naked, Mulder, just wearing nothing but jeans.
Yeah. And you've got to love the red Speedos. But then again, you could argue, that is very much a Mulder Krycek moment. So you can, bring in the Mulder Krycek slash at that point.
It's very homoerotic.
Yeah.
You mentioned like later seasons, and there's a definite change in Mulder's character that I think there's a scene in Familiar when they're in the woods and they just, this child has been killed by this whatever, and these like sheriffs, they're dismissing Scully's like her theory, just like, she's this tiny little woman, and Mulder just something that he wouldn't have done in the early seasons. He like not only like defends her, but he like Agent Scully is she's a doctor, she's very qualified. It's like the way he steps in, it was such a gratifying moment, like this like husband moment, like Mulder, like, the power structure is there's still an imbalance because these men just like they're cops and she's an FBI agent, surely she has more authority than they do. But because she's a woman, they feel they can just, dismiss her. But then in steps Mulder, and he has evolved so much.
Yes, that's where the allyship comes in, rather than because I think, and what's interesting now, and I think a lot of the fans are seeing this, like when I rewatch the original series, like Mulder is he's a dick quite often. Whereas, yeah, like you said, early season Mulder would not have stepped in at that point. So maybe he's matured, maybe he's grown up a bit and is now, being an ally rather than just running off to chase aliens and leaving Scully to deal with the cops.
I mean, it's such a great sort of it's such a so satisfying to see his progression when in the pilot he says to Scully, nothing else matters to me. I need to find the truth. And nothing is so like he can put himself in danger, he can put Scully in danger, he can put the whole world in danger just to
Mhm.
get to the truth. And you see him gradually, like even in season 2, in the episode that got me hooked on the X-Files, me and my brother, uh, Colony and Endgame, the
Oh,
two-parter.
nice.
In
Yeah.
Colony and Endgame, he chooses Scully over who he believes is Samantha. So
Mm,
you see that even that progression, that his priorities shift from being this like it's a very I mean, of course he wants to find his sister, but it's still a very like sort of selfish
yeah.
want. It's his passion, but then he progresses and he chooses
Mm,
someone else, like becoming selfless. So I love to see that also.
yeah.
Um, One last point. I said one last point before, but this is something that I thought a lot about. You write also in this essay. Let's see if I can find. Yes, so you write that fanfic authors were eager to fix the instances where Scully was made a damsel in distress on the show.
Mhm.
And like I can absolutely see that. However, my experience with MSR fanfiction is kind of the opposite of that, in that a
Mhm.
lot of MSR fanfic that I read seemed to completely miss the point of Scully as a character, as this strong female character, and especially her relationship with Mulder. And so they would write them back into these traditional gender roles that Mulder and Scully never really belonged to.
Mm,
And it was just so infuriating. Like you have this amazing, strong character as Scully who does not fit into these like boxes set to us by literature and by movies in the patriarchy. And you take this gift of this character and you take a gift of this interesting, complex relationship between a man and a woman who that doesn't fit into this like rom-com drama sort of soap opera Nicholas Sparks novel. And what you do is like you can play with it. You can just stretch this envelope and you can put it on like inverse it even more. But what you do is you write them back into these stereotypes. And so often I've read stories where Scully's this like sexually repressed damsel who needs Mulder to help her climax or whatever, or like save her, and she's like has no agency. And I'm thinking, okay, so when Chris Carter strips Scully of her agency, we send him death threats, but when fans do it, that's okay.
yeah.
And it was just like so. It's one of the reasons why I stopped reading. Like MS, I
Mm,
mean, MSR is just not really for me. But one of the reasons I
yeah.
just stopped reading it altogether is because Scully was not Scully in those
Mm,
stories. She was just a damsel, and I'm thinking, is it because those writers are just, they're just not good? Or is it because these gender roles and these stereotypes have been ingrained so much in our psyche, in our collective psyche, that even when we're given a character like Scully and a relationship like Mulder and Scully, we still cannot think outside of that box, that
mm.
we still revert to these stereotypes. So I don't know, what do you think?
That's a really good question. Um, I mean, I think maybe I was just really lucky because I was reading and writing fic on LiveJournal, so I wasn't reading stuff on like Gossamer, which is obviously like one of, if not the biggest X-Files fanfic archive. Um, and I was lucky to be reading a lot of excellent writers. And there's a few that I mentioned in that chapter. So Idella is a really good writer. Wendell One is brilliant. Um, there's a writer called Elijah Vagata and they write Scully really, really well. Like she is a fully rounded, complex character. Um, but like you said, these sort of stereotypical gender roles are ingrained in the culture. Like if you know, think about fairy tales, and like Rapunzel lets down her hair and meets the prince, and it's like, well, surely she could have cut off her hair and somehow fashioned a rope and tied it to the bed and got out of the tower on her own without needing to have the prince come and rescue her. So there is a lot of deeply ingrained, particularly narrative structures about this is how relationships work. And it may be that those are so ingrained that we just follow them. It may be that it's easier to do, because Scully and Mulder, but she's not an easy character to write, I think. So you've got to know the character really well, but you've got to be a good writer to really write Scully. And quite often, if I was reading and I was like, no, this is completely out of character, I'd just stop reading. So that might be an element of it as well. I think the X-Files is potentially one of the more difficult fandoms to write for because it's so complex. It's not necessarily like writing for, Friends or something that's lighter and easier. So I think you need to have a level of ability as a writer to do it justice as well. And I'm not saying that these writers are bad or lazy or anything like that, but I wonder, because it's so much more complex, you need to up your game as a writer. So relying on those ingrained kind of stereotypes and tropes and gender structures doesn't work for it.
Yeah, I agree. And I had this conversation with another fan some time ago, and they also said that Scully is just a hard character to write. And if you're a novice writer, especially like if you're very young, you really don't have it like the experience or the perspective to really, like, you want to write a strong female character. But
Yeah.
and I mean, I am not trying to call out any individual author. I'm just saying that it's an infuriating trend to see in fan fiction, and I just hope that people will get better at it.
Yeah. And it's practice. Like watch the
Right.
show more. Watch it on repeat, like we had to do.
Right.
And
Right.
then just keep writing. But yeah, no, I find Mulder a much easier character to write than Scully. Much, much easier.
Um, do you, I mean, it's a very like cliche question, but we've been talking for almost 2 hours now, so I guess I'm just gonna ask like more
Go
general
for
questions. Do you relate more to Mulder or Scully, or are there parts of you that you would say are more like Scully or more Mulder? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I think when I was younger, I was definitely much more like Mulder. Um, so like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a parapsychologist. So and before I even watched the X-Files, like I said, I thought it was going to be an awful show that ripped the piss out of science fiction fans. I had books on ghosts and the Loch Ness monster, and explained disappearances and stuff like that. So I definitely I was more of a Mulder when I was younger. But I think the older I've gotten, the more like Scully I've become. Um, and partly I think that's because I'm an academic as well now. So I tend to have to think, discussions about subjectivity and objectivity to one side. Like I have to think rationally about things, have to analyze the data. So I am more rational, I think, in that respect. And also, like, Scully is just awesome. She is such a strong character, and I want to be like Scully. I want to stand up for the things that I believe in, like right and wrong, and morality, and compassion, and all of the stuff that she does. And Mulder, as much as I love him, doesn't always do that. He's way too self-centered quite a lot of the time. So I think, yeah, the older I get, the more like Scully I try to be.
I want to be like Scully when I grow up. It's like you say that as
Yes.
like as a
Yeah.
fully grown up person.
Yeah.
There is,
I need a
yeah,
t-shirt with that written on the front of it.
right? Oh, by the way, they say t-shirt, and it just happened. Like seriously, it was just serendipity that I happened to have this t-shirt lying next to me. It's this one. And it
Nice.
was it was a gift from another fan. Her name is Vida Carlino, and she gave it to me after File Fest, I saw her
Awesome.
at File Fest and she was wearing the same like identical t-shirt, and I said, "Oh my God, I love your t-shirt." And she was like had this like full Scully cosplay with like the wig, and I said, "I love your t-shirt." And I said that I ordered one actually online, but they sent the wrong size and like it was just tiny. And later, and the next day I meet her at the airport as I'm about to board my plane, and she's like there at the airport. She says, "I have something for you." And she pulls out this t-shirt.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Mm. It's like stories like I mean it's like these like little moments of like just human connection and interaction that I cherish the most about the fandom. It's uh
Same.
I before FileFest back when I was on Twitter, I'm not anymore. Uh I wrote that I want to go to FileFest, but I'm going alone, and I'm just like so worried and I have anxiety. I'm not gonna talk to anyone. It's just gonna be a horrible experience. And, like it's expensive. And when I went, I was approached by this girl, and she said, "I read your tweet that you were worried, scared about going to FileFest alone, and I want to say that it's so brave that you did that. And now we're friends." So
Yeah, it's stuff like that that makes fandom. I think, like, yeah, we all love the text that we're fans of, but it's building those connections with other people that becomes more than just about the show. It becomes like a real friendship, and I
exactly.
love that.
Exactly. And I mean, it's also as adults, we get to choose our friends much more than when we were kids, because when
Yeah,
you're a kid or even when you're in college, you just, you're friends with whoever's in your class.
yeah,
And but as an adult, like you sort of you can choose your friendships much more. Like it's not like, oh, I I vet all my friends. It's more like, it's finding someone who you do have a real connection with.
yeah,
And fandom is a great way of finding friends like that.
totally.
Bethan, thank you so much. I thought we are going to talk for like, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes. We've been talking for almost 2 hours now. And I could talk actually for two more with you.
Same, honestly. Get me started on the X-Files and I don't shut up.
Same, same. I mean, I next time I can walk you through my collection of like books and DVDs that I have and like collectibles. Uh,
Excellent.
yeah. So
Yes, I can walk you through mine as well.
I had a very, very good time talking to you. I'm
Me
gonna be
too.
honest with you. Thank you. I was very nervous because you're like
Hey,
you're academic, you wrote a book about the X-Files, and like I wanted to talk, discuss these like pretty serious topics, and I was just obsessing, and I've written notes in two different notebooks, and I have like bookmarked like your chapter, and just wrote so many notes. I was so nervous, but this turned out to be such a easy conversation.
good. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, don't be nervous. Don't be nervous talking to me.
Thank you so much, and I hope that we can get together again and just not even like
Yes.
this, but just talking like people
Yeah.
without recording the conversation.
I would love that. That'd be awesome.
Yes. Well, I want again thank you and have a lovely rest of your evening, and
You too.
thank you, and a great tomorrow is Friday, so have a great
Yes.
weekend.
Thank you. You too.